Welcome. My name is Atle Schekland, President of the Digital Valley Institute. I'm joined today by best-selling author, speaker, and advisor Geoffrey Moore. I consider him one of the smartest guys in the IT industry. And his book, Crossing the Chasm, has sold more than 1 million copies by addressing the challenges faced by startups. And his latest book, Zone to Win, is basically guiding established enterprises through the same journey. So thank you for joining us, Jeff.
Good to be here. Thank you, Ali.
So three questions for you. Everybody is now talking about the need for digital transformation. What stories are you being told, or what are the most important stories for you?
Well, I think the biggest stories are around the idea that we had this huge explosion of consumer IT that created cloud computing, mobile computing, and this whole digital landscape that we now all live in as consumers. And in this decade, the enterprises and the governments and the various institutions have said, we have to onboard that system of engagement, if you will, to our classic systems of business. And that's been a huge challenge, not because the two systems were never designed to go together. So the IT organizations have been spending the better part of the decade knitting this together, dealing with the cybersecurity problems that happen when you bring together two systems that weren't designed together at the same time. Having said all that, though, every time you do it, every time you make it work, the amount of productivity that's unleashed, the better customer responsiveness you achieve, it makes it absolutely compelling to have to do it. And what's the most compelling thing, and the thing we're always looking for in digital transformation, is when does the resource become so pervasive that it's basically free if you can just figure out a way to bring it into your enterprise? So cloud computing really has made deploying software globally free. Mobile has made communicating with people around the world virtually free. When it's that free, you've got to kind of take advantage of it. The next step, and the ones we're waiting for now, are what you and I were talking about earlier about systems of intelligence, getting the log files from these systems of engagement, comparing them to the records in our systems of record, and getting new insights and prescriptions. That's still an adventure. And I would say some industries are well down that path with forcing functions like Amazon and Airbnb and Uber, and others are in the middle of the path, and some are still just about to get started. So that's where I think the next decade's action is going to be.
So it seems like a lot of in place to actually make the transition, but a lot of people I talk to, organization I talk to, they seem to be struggling moving from digital experimentation to transformation. So what do you consider the biggest barriers?
Well, so first of all, I think digital experimentation itself is an important thing to do. You need to get your organization exposed to what's possible. But then the notion of, if you're going to really take it to scale, it's not so much the digital systems themselves, it's all of the re-engineering of the legacy systems and the business processes that slows the organization down. So we've developed a little triangle model because consultants either use 2x2 matrices or triangles. That's the only two diagrams we know. So in this triangle model, there's a bottom, a middle, and a top. And the idea is to work your way up the triangle with digital transformation. So the bottom layer is just the infrastructure itself. And it says, look, you can onboard cloud computing, you can onboard mobile computing, and not change your business processes. Just literally just run IT in a more efficient, more modern way. But for the rest of the organization, it would be as transparent as you could possibly make. The positive there is you now have scaled experience with these new digital systems. Okay. Now you haven't really captured much of the value. You've captured maybe some cost reduction. The next step, the middle of the triangle, we call reframing the operating model. So the bottom is the infrastructure model. The middle is the operating model. That's when you start changing your business processes, how you deal with customers, how you deal with the supply chain. You're getting the systems of engagement are making this happen much faster. Think about, taxi cab companies using an Uber-like application to get their people to come to them. Airbnb has now created hotels that want to make a better concierge experience or check-in experience. You're changing your operating model. You're still in the same business. You're still in the hotel business or the transportation business or the retail business, but the Amazons and the Ubers and the Airbnbs have forced you to modernize your operating model. That means you have to get engaged with all of the money-earning functions in your company, and those money-earning functions are under a lot of pressure to perform every quarter. And so the getting the bandwidth and getting them to get over the hump, and they also have some very strong points of view about doing it the old way. So it's a change. We call it change management. It's a huge, huge challenge, and that's where I see a lot of the challenges happening right now. There's also the top of the triangle, which is not the infrastructure model or the operating model, it's the business model. And that's where you get into the boardroom and the aspiration of data is the new oil. We have all these, we could be in whole new businesses. This could be very exciting. I think those things are aspirational, but if you can start them sort of to the side in some sort of sequestered skunk works kind of thing, I think you can at least get them going. Again, getting those to scale though often requires access to capital that is hard to find. So that one, if you don't have strong backing from the board and the CEO, that's very hard to bring off. So I think for most people on this call, it's the operating model one and modernizing the business processes, bringing on the sales force, bringing on customer support, bringing on the supply chain. That's where I think the challenge is today.
And one more question. So how do you have any tips on how organizations then can fast track their digital learning curve and actually move faster?
Well, this gets to this book called Zone to Win, the last one you just mentioned, because the book says the way you want to do that is we call it zone your enterprise. And all that means is to say these various parts of the enterprise have different cadences, different cultures, different operating models. And if you can keep them separate from each other, you can go faster. So there's obviously your core business, that's one zone. And you run that on an annual planning basis, and that's great. There's a whole set of cost centers. We call it the productivity zone. That's another zone. And cost centers have a different way of running than the core business doing your finance, your HR, your IT, those functions. But then the third thing, and this is what most companies are now getting better at, is if you want to fast track anything, you have to get it out of the performance zone and out of the productivity zone, because those zones are not designed to fast track. So you create something, we call it the incubation zone. What we've learned about the incubation zone is most companies have one, but they manage it very, very badly. And so the real lesson that we've learned in the last year or two is that the venture capital industry's way of managing incubating businesses is something that enterprises can use inside their own enterprise. Not the financial model of venture capital, the operating model of venture capital. How do you manage incubation? And venture capitalists do manage it, but not the way you manage your core business and not the way you manage a functional process. So I think that's the key learning there.
So I also want to say, we talked about briefly the Zone to Win book, and I just want to congratulate you on the raving reviews of that book. I saw Mark Benioff, CEO at Salesforce, said it was the playbook for succeeding in today's disrupted, connected, fast-paced business. And Satya Nadella at Microsoft said, and I quote, the persistent examination of what it takes to win in today's competitive, disruptive business environment. So well done, Jeff. What motivated you to write the book?
Well, you know that you mentioned crossing the chasm and Zone to Win. There's actually it's the same journey. It's the same journey of how do you bring a disruptive innovation to scale. But what we learned along the way is, in some ways, that's much easier for a startup than an established enterprise for two main reasons. One is they only have one place to spend their money. They're not distracted. They're not conflicted. They just say, if you give them another dollar, they've only got one place to put it. And the second thing is they get venture capital funding. And so in established enterprise, you have multiple uses for a dollar and there's no venture capitalist. And so you have to take money out of your most profitable business and put it into your least profitable business. And if you want to scale that business, you have to put a lot of money into it. And all of a sudden you're losing money and your investors are questioning your judgment and your board is after you. So that's where the book, and so the book was just an attempt to say, look, there is a possible playbook here to do it, but we shouldn't take this idea for granted. This is hard to do.
Excellent advice and perspective. Thank you for your time, Jeff. Always a pleasure speaking with you.
Oh, thank you.